Welcome to Amp Up Your Vizzes. Woo! Thank you for spending your last session in TC with me. My name is Fish. I am a pre-sales consultant based out of the Singapore office. And what that means to be a pre-sales consultant for me for the last 5 years is that we spend a lot of time to do solutioning, do problem solving, survey reviews of your deployment, and of course, building a lot of dashboards. So if I were to bring back something closer to our everyday life about, just interacting with interfaces, what makes an impactful interface? And I know I'm supposed to do a long introduction of myself, but we'll get there. So when we look at web interface, the concept of UX and UI is really in our everyday life, and actually it's very applicable to designing dashboards. So the first thing we want to think about is making a good first impression, and that means when you first look at it for the first 3 to 5 seconds, does it attract your attention? Does it entice you to go further? Do you want to keep looking at it? And next, you want it to be digestible and clear, because the clearer it is, the better experience you have. You understand what you're looking at. You want it to be familiar because you want to be able to have that sense of comfort when you are interacting with the dashboards or with the interface you are looking at, because if you don't know how to use it, you can be confused, you may give up, you may just want to move on. Next thing is delighting, and usually the word or that word is the goal of all interface we want to achieve. And when we say delight, it's things like, does the click work? Am I showing the information that it's supposed to be there? When people are looking for something, are you giving them that, right? And the last thing is actually really important, that is not to distract. So if we were to think about designing dashboards and think about these principles, we can use these topics to help us guide our design process in building our dashboards. We're going to first start with storytelling, and let's start with my own story. I think the timer is not started. Help. Thank you. So, how many of you want to know why my name is Fish? Yeah, so yesterday I got 1,500 hands. And yeah, this is most of you as well. So let's try to be interactive. Do you think I was an ex-Olympic swimmer? Yes? Oh my God, yesterday, everyone goes no. Do you think I love fishing? No, yes. No. I love to eat fish. Do you say that? Kind of. Maybe, do you think I'm a big fan of Finding Nemo? Yeah, you guys were the same as the last crowd. Everybody goes yes. How about this? Do you think I have a secret identity? Sorry? Do I fish for passwords? Whoa, nice one. I'm going to use that. So actually, the real story is not that cool. Where I'm at, or where I'm from in Singapore, it's a multicultural society. If we go out, all the public signs have 4 languages: English, Chinese, Malay, and Tamil. So the thing is, our working language is English. So what that means is all the classes are in English. When you read your names, it's not going to be the one that's at the bottom, which gives you exactly how to say my name. So everybody goes to the one on top, right? So what that means to me is my entire life, I have to deal with every variation of how people say my name. Anyone want to try? No, yeah. So So when I started my working life, I got this initial, which I thought is perfect because now I get to make everybody's life simple, and I don't need to spend the first 5 minutes trying to teach people how to say my name, and I usually give up in the second try anyway, so let's go with fish. So that's storytelling, right? And what's important in storytelling is you need to have these 3 prerequisites. What that means is if you lack any of these elements, it's gonna have a high chance you won't be able to tell a story at all. So why do you think I put narrative at the center for dashboard design? When people think about dashboard design, most people think about it at the visual angle. Like, they just think about how to make it pretty, right? So let me give you an example. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an artist. I was really fascinated with colors and the stroke techniques, and it was a serious hobby. But as a regular Taiwanese kid, I just go to school. There is no special class for arts, and then regular Taiwanese kids go to English class after school. So that's just like really normal life. And so just one fine day, like any other regular day, my parents come pick me up at the English class school. And I got into the car and they said to me, hey, do you want to go to Singapore to study? And of course, like, long story with like, everyone's gonna work really hard, blah, blah, blah. But the concept is like a boarding school concept, but except like your family is 2,000 miles away. Anyone would do that when you were 12? No one? I got one friend yesterday. Anyone would send your kid when they were 12 to do that? No, wow, okay. So when I was 12, I sort of have selective hearing already, you know, like the kind, you know, someone in the house asks you to go wash the dishes and you're like, what? So I didn't hear about, you know, the serious part of the conversation. I kind of thought that I was gonna go on a holiday, you know, every time you go on the plane, you go on a holiday. But of course it didn't happen. So what happened was, I was basically like that. So I failed my entire first semester because everything was in English. It's like every time I try to get food, I would go to the longest line because I want to use that time to make sure I translate the food I want in my mind and make sure I say it right. And eventually, of course, I made it to college. In Singapore, back in my time, there were 3 universities, and I had 2 options. One was the design school, and the other was the information system management school. So, obviously, I went to the information system management school because my brother was in computer science, and I wanted to have more things in common with him. So, you see how narrative make a big difference? Yeah? And now let's look at how we can tell a good story, or what makes a good story, right? With these elements that you already have. And the first thing you want to do is to make sure that your story is clear. And finding clarity in a business scenario is a continuous process. And every iteration you make in this process is going to make your story clearer and better, improve every time. And when I say iteration, it means you're gonna ask multiple questions about that dashboard. Are you answering the core questions? What's the core question? Are they important? Why are they important? Do you have the data? Do you have enough data? Do you need additional data? Do those information you're trying to deliver resonate or connect to your audience? Are those things what the audience wants? So you keep asking those questions, and yesterday I had a question about, I had a lot of things on my dashboards. I just put everything on my dashboard, and I see how you try to streamline it. How do you do that? And this is one way to do that. Like, you want to find that one single topic that highlights a key message and streamline your dashboard. So there's basically two ways for me that I use to tell a clear story. And the first way is I want to have an informative dashboard. The dashboard's purpose is just to inform. So there's very little interactivity. But you see the grids, the reference lines, the techniques that I use here give the users, give the readers a really clear message about the conclusion. So this purpose is really to inform rather than to allow people to explore. Right? And the other option that I go to is something like this. This is a viz done by Tom from our London office. So he created a fictional portfolio of asset management. And with this, there's no predefined story, right? With a set of questions, you can draw and construct your own story, draw your own conclusions. So for example, what's the current fund value? What's the latest day change? And with the interactions that you go throughout the dashboards, the end users can find their own stories and own conclusion of the angle they are interested in. And of course, if you want to have a bigger menu of options, this dashboard built by Adam is something that I find really, really useful. So what he did was basically he categorized the way to construct the dashboard details in the way that is at the level of detail or level of granularity of the data and the type of audience that they're going to use it for. So for example, if you look at the top left KPI dashboards, so those are the ones that is more to inform, like the example we talked about before. And as you go through it, it goes more exploratory. So the next element is engagement. So let's look at this example. And if we think about media, I think media is probably the best people, or they know better than anyone how hard it is to keep a reader's attention. So the editors actually found a really clever way to put the readers in the driver's seats. So what happens in this section in New York Times is that they get the readers to draw what they think the unemployment rate is before showing them the actual numbers. So it lets the users or the readers be really personally invested and really go into engaging with the topic. So how you can actually achieve that in Tableau, there are many ways, right? So obviously, dashboard actions is one way. And in this example, looking at investment strategy and estimating the corresponding portfolio returns, it starts with using parameters. So when you use parameters, your users get to input the value they are interested in, and they also get to control the data they want to see or the visual they want to see. So there are many ways to do it. The next thing, or the last thing, to tell a good story to me is stickiness. And when I talk about stickiness, what I mean is this dashboard or is the story memorable? Does it create a lasting impact? Does it make people think back about your dashboard? And also at the same time, you need to ensure that it's really easy to understand. So to me, I think this is really difficult because you want to be creative, but at the same time, you have to make sure you're not causing any confusion. So this dashboard that's built by Sarah. She's one of Tableau's Singapore's talk leader. And she started doing Makeover Monday last year, and she did the entire year. And I was really impressed because when she asked me as a director in the bank, how do you upskill? And I told her about Makeover Monday. She actually did everything. So this is one of her work. And it really stuck with me because she used a really simple chart type, which is just the bubbles, but it resonates or it relates to the metals competition because it just reminds you of the shape of the metals, right? And it also engages you at the same time because on the left panel, you will see the parameters letting users to choose what countries they want the competition to be on. And then you choose what kind of metals that you want the comparison to be on. And with that Viz at the center, it shows you across time which country is doing better or worse for that metal. So in summary, if you think about telling a good story, you want to tell a compelling story, you want to make sure you have the 3 elements to start with, right? And then to tell a good story, you want to make sure you try to do all 3 of it. But think about, just keep in mind that being clear, being engaging, stickiness can be really hard sometimes, but if you get to achieve it, that's kind of a bonus for me. So here, let's look at an example that we'll use throughout the session today. It's a wealth management dashboard that I found on Tableau Public. So in this dashboard, what you can see is on the first or the top, there is the parameters that the users can input. So what they'll do is they want to select a particular KPI to drive the entire dashboard, right? So all the axes will be driven by that selection. And then they will choose a particular date and the type of period they want to compare it to. So for example, if I choose the date of today, I want to compare it with previous month or quarter or year. So that's the top section. And you see those arrows, that's what we call the bands, but over here the number's obviously not big enough, but that's the idea. And then we have the whole thing that drives around whether that KPI is achieving or is doing better or worse than the previous period that we are comparing with across the regions, states, products, advisors, and across time. So if you look at this, it seems like it tells a good story, right? I think you kind of got most of the element you need to tell a good story, but to me, when I first look at it, I didn't think that it's enough. So let's look at how layout and chart types can make a difference to that. So let's first start with chart types. When we think about appropriate chart types, there's this resource that's available for everyone right now. That's the visual vocabulary from the Financial Times. So it makes a lot of sense to me to reference this material because the media has indeed been the one who would convey or deliver information for as long as I know. And it's especially difficult and especially important because they need to get it spot on every time for having to deliver it to a wide range of audience, people who can come from very different backgrounds. So these visual vocabulary help them to decide on the best visual to basically deliver the message. So what's even better is Andy Kribel, one of the Zen masters that I look up to as well, is he created or recreated the visual vocabulary in Tableau and published it on Tableau Public. So what that means is when you're trying to build a certain chart type, not only you know that that chart type is good for a certain type of analysis, you also know that you can achieve it, right? And if you can download it and also credit the author, that will encourage the authors to, enable the downloads and let you reverse engineer how he built it. But having said that, what do you think this means? So of course, the data community find a way to relate to that. So the visual editor from The Guardian tweeted that, And how many of you have been me? Oh, you guys. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, so, so the fact that fancy data viz is sometimes absolutely petrifying because it really doesn't serve the purpose of delivering the message, right? Here's an example, and it actually happened to me. I was working with a customer, and this is what they're supposed to build to look at the rank of customers, who is doing the best, who should be our VIPs with sales and profit here, obviously. But like I was more blunt before, so I went like, why did you do that? So you really want to make sure that you're not building or you're not selecting a chart type because you're trying to impress or stand out, but you're choosing that because it really tells you, it really answers the questions you're trying to resolve, right? So now let's go back to the wealth management dashboard and try to figure that out. I'm just going to go through each of the elements here, and I'm going to start with the bands, which has the arrows and the numbers. And if you look at this, you can realize or you can see that every single thing you see two elements. That means your users need to process two information, but they're actually the same thing, right? So the arrow and the color represents whether it's doing better or worse, right? So what I'm doing here is basically just removing the arrows, just use the color to keep it simple, so that they don't need to, figure out two things which is the same, right? And over here, the same thing, we want to bring that colors. And before I do that, I wanted to bring in, just explore whether adding the managers and adding the states is gonna take a lot of real estate. But it actually don't. So it's actually a very streamlined company. So last thing is just putting that color in. And over here as well, we need to get that color, and we want to, reduce the amount of information to process. So at the same time, we want to remove that arrow at the end of the lollipop chart and just change it to a simple circle. So the same thing with the other one. We just want to build the same lollipop chart here as well. So how you do that is basically just copy the same measure, put it on the side, and have one that is on bar with the thinnest line to me that I like, and the other with the mark type of circle. And at the end, just make a dual axis and make sure the axes are synchronized. And here we have the map and the spark line, which you also want to bring in the managers and states, because originally it's just a region, which is the same as before. So if you want to make the spark line match, you want to make sure that they are aligned the same way. Okay? So now, going back to layout. If we think about layout, or for me, when I think about layout, I personally think Johnny Walker is someone who has really achieved his own style. So you can see here, he makes something really prominent in front of you. He is actually really a master of birds dashboards. You can see his Tableau public profile. He's really interested in this field. But if you look closer, it's not only impactful because of the design, but also because he's using really simple yet easy to understand chart types. It's just bubble charts, bar charts, and maps. So what makes his viz so impactful or so clear is his layout. And if we were to refer to the concept in print or editorial design, there's this concept or this idea that's called the composition. So what he did, or what Johnny did, was he created a focal point which you can use size, color or position and create that focal point where it will draw your gaze, draw your user's gaze in, and that, I would say, retain their attention and help them or help your users to want to look at it more. And if we were to continue on the concept of the print design, the gutters and margins are also something really important in the prints. So in Tableau 10.4, we have released the feature to allow you to add margins and paddings. So how many of you have been using Tableau before this version? And how many of you are Team Tile? Yeah, so what happens to us is we have to bring in the empty blocks, right, to create the margins and paddings, right? So now with 10.4, we no longer need to do that. And why is it so powerful to use those margins and paddings? This is my favorite analogy. If you were to look at these two pictures, which one would you go to? The one on the right or the one on the left? On the right, right? So it's really because it makes you more comfortable. It makes you feel like, you know, the sense of comfort let you want to go in and explore. So that's the same. Usually, the more margins you have, the more paddings you have, the dashboards tend to appeal more to users. But if you think you don't have that much time to think of a sophisticated design like Johnny Walker, I have two options that I look at a lot, which is one, design to grid. So design to grid is really useful and effective when you are trying to inform, right? So like we discussed before in your story, to inform, there isn't a need for lots of interactivity. So using the grid design is something that I find really easy to go for. The other option is section and strip. So section and strip is really useful to me because it gives you the visual direction, or it gives the users the visual direction where they will start and end, right? There isn't a lot of blocks like around the whole dashboard. So it's just from one end to the other, right? Or from top to bottom, right? So for the corporate world, it's usually just a vertical one, a horizontal one. And so now let's go back to the wealth management dashboard and let's try to build this, right? The first thing I'm doing is just removing that icon because all it's saying is, you know, you can click. So, and then I'm just gonna take that parameters and distribute evenly and put it down, right? Because I think that user interactivity goes across. Right, and then just going through the map section, I removed the map because the information on the states is already with the bullet chart and the spark line. So I can bring that down and create that section and strip concept in this dashboard. And then I created a container to bring the bands down to the same section, right? So I'm bringing all the numbers down. And finally, again, distribute evenly. And now we add the paddings, right? So now I have a layout that I think will work, and I'll add the paddings across. With this, what we're doing here is really just to make sure the real estate is not too unbalanced, right? And with the spark line, we don't need those headers because we already have them with the bullet charts. Right, so we just need to remove all of them and just reduce the size of the fluctuation to create that spark line, and then just bring up. So the next thing is looking at text, which, as we discussed, is similar to narrative, which is very important. So what's the role of text in your dashboards? is really for you to complement and enhance the message of your dashboard, the message you're trying to deliver. So it could be trying to explain or introduce your dashboards. It could be giving context. So let's look at examples. This is a viz done by Samuel that talks about how affordable a property at major cities is. So if you look at the title, it introduces the dashboard and purpose. And when you look at the subtitle, it will further explain the core question Samuel is asking. So if you look at the core content, which is the radial chart, the longer the stretch, the more expensive it gets, right? If you look at the content itself, you will also see reference line and annotation that give you a direction and also give you the insight at the same time. So basically, let me look at this. Sao Paulo is the least expensive, and Monaco is the most expensive. Okay, so I think I got it the other way around. So basically, the longer the stretch, the more space you get with $1 million US. So that means the longer the stretch, the cheaper it is. Yeah. So, and then at the end, we have the guidance. So the guidance is there because this is not the, the usual kind of charts that we look at. So he put that guidance there so that everyone can just, refer to it and be able to easily understand what he's trying to say. The next viz is by my colleague, Jenny. She is the author of multiple viz of the week, Vizzes. And this viz I particularly like because it's a really interesting topic about outlanders. So she found a data set that corresponds the TV episodes and the book sales. And what she did really well here is that she used the titles to explain and help to navigate the users what they can look at. On the top right, she have the more info icon on demand. So if you want context about what's Outlander about, you can go there and look for it. And at the center is a dynamic content where when you select on a particular episode, the description of the episode will dynamically change. So in terms of giving context and description, it's not so dull and rigid. And my favorite section is this, where she has a clear title and subtitle that has a call to action. The content presenting the data itself about the relationship between the book sale and the TV episode. And the guidance she had was in the form of annotation and reference line. And she had detail in tooltip that's accessible on Hover that give you the point of time details. So speaking of tooltip, how many of you have used tooltip selection? Okay, maybe half the room, I think. So tooltip selection is something that I find heavily underused. I think a lot of people don't see or don't quite get the feature, but it's a really powerful way for you to dynamically explore your data story. So if you go back and check it out, it's really, really good, especially when you have a big scatter plot, or if you have a big or long bar charts or a big map with lots of points. Tooltip selection is amazing. And of course, this in tooltip is, I think, probably one of the most popular features that was asked for, and there are tons of ways people are using it really, really well. So the example on the right is where Tom actually bring in a mini scorecard in the stock performance tracking dashboard he has, which is, I think, is really, really cool. Another example by a really fantastic designer, I would think, by Adam. He created this really, really cool dashboards that I have no idea how to do. Like, I've never imagined that you can do this. But if you look at this, he starts his visualization on the right, where there's description about his career and each album. And if you scroll through the description, the album will be highlighted in the chart on the left, right? So if you see that hover, that is basically the album's description. And if you were to hover on a particular singles in that album, you'll see more details in the tooltip, right? So that tooltip tells you information about that particular song's energy, acoustic, and so on, and also the inspiration of why he wrote that song. And because it's not the particular or typical chart type people look at, again, he has this in tooltip to help people understand or go about reading his dashboard. Remember Iron Viz winner, one of them, Hisham? Yeah, isn't he amazing? So he did something similar, but in a very, very different way to help people understand his Viz. He used the show and hide button in this dashboard. So if you look at the top right, there's that eye icon. If you click on it, there's an overlay on top of the dashboard. And I thought that is really, really smart because that immediately just helped people reference what that part of the dashboard means, right? So this is one of the work that I was really, I learned a lot from him. So in summary, I think if you think about text or narrative, you don't want to confuse people. You really want to make sure that it's there to value add and not do things like this in the slide. So ultimately, you want it to be clear, you want it to be concise, and try to have the text close to the data that is relevant to. Okay, so let's go back to our wealth management dashboard. What I think was lacking here was the title. I thought the title wasn't clear enough. It was just wealth management, right? It doesn't say anything else, like what is this about? So what I wanted to do is to add more context to it. So I had the dynamic parameters on the title and also add a subtitle to tell people, hey, this dashboard answers this particular question. And the question is, has that particular KPI you have selected improved or not on a particular time period you have selected comparing to the previous period? Right. So with the dynamic parameters that you can insert in the titles, it makes your title really dynamic across the interactivities that your user is going to have in the dashboard. So if you take that, you put it there, now your entire dashboard is much clearer, instead of having users to try to figure the dashboard on their own. So now I have the title. I'll just go into checking each of the sheet's title and the object's title. So there was a spelling mistake, and with the bar chart's title, what I'm doing here is basically changing it to something more meaningful because the dynamic parameter is already in the title, so we don't need to repeat that. So here is basically the performance of regional managers by state. Right? And the spark line represents the fluctuation across month for that particular managers and state. And the next one is looking at the product's performance, followed by the top 5 advisors. Right? And for the top 5 advisors, whenever you want to do that top 5 filters, and with a dashboard action, you want to make sure those actions is in context filters. The last thing is that there's one number in the bands that has tooltip, so just gonna remove that so that everything is consistent in the bands. All right, last but not least, we are at color. And I think color is one of the biggest topic on visual design. Why? Because every time you choose a color, I think it just changed a lot about the message you're trying to convey or deliver. And it just simply gives you a very direct way to change the message, and it's just really powerful. So when we talk about color, it's usually just these two things. The first being the hue itself, which is the color choice itself. And the next thing is intensity, which you can call it saturation level, or you can call it opacity in Tableau. So I want to talk more about hue because sometimes you use a combination of colors, and some combination is harmonious, some combination clashes. And you can actually use those clashing colors to your advantage based on what, maybe you have KPI or different metrics. So those things are actually really interesting. Now let's look at another great example by Mike on oil and gold. So here, not only he used composition, right? The way he created the focal point was using color, right? So you can see how he used those two colors and in a way that you can't ignore the main message, which is to say that this dashboard is about oil and gold, and you just, that's it. You just need to look further. So he used it in a really, really fantastic way. It's just the message is really clear, and it really stuck with me. It's very memorable. But color will not only be used in a way to create focal points. You can also use color in a way to trigger emotions. So this example that I learned from Andy, it's about the stats on war. And if you just compare the two dashboards, they are exactly the same data, they are exactly the same bar charts. The only thing that's different is the color, which is the major thing. If you just ignore the title, ignore the orientation, just with the color, you can still feel the difference in emotion, right? So color really changed people's, or it may trigger people's emotions sometimes, and there are a lot of researchers and psychologists who try to study how colors impact human psychology exactly, but it's really difficult. So if you look at this color wheel by Robert, some of the colors and the emotion he attached to, you may agree or disagree, right? So for example, when I showed this to one of my customers in the bank, they said that they were told that blue is supposed to be a neutral color. And that's why their corporate branding is in blue. But over here, it says a different thing, right? So it's pretty normal. So even though color psychology has been studied and analyzed for many, many years, but there is still a lot of debate when it comes to the impact of color in human psychology. And I would think it's really because how people are from different backgrounds, culture, and they have their own preferences, right? So here's a really good example. How many of you have seen this Viz? One, okay, so don't say anything. So what do you think this Viz is about? Anyone? Politics. Agree? And it's not. So you guys said exactly the same answers when I showed it to people who have not seen this before. And everyone thought it's about politics, but the only reason he chose this color, he's actually the Iron Viz winner with this Viz 2 years ago. The only reason he chose this color is because he's French. Yeah. So if you were to try to keep it simple again, which I like, we can think of using colors in this three perspectives. The primary color which I would think you should use in majority of your dashboard, because the more grayscale you have, the clearer it can become, the more contrast and clarity you can create. Extended colors are usually used when you try to make an emphasis on a particular key message you have, or you want to use it for corporate branding. Alerting color or status color is, it should only be used when you want to, trigger critical action. You want to motivate people to take action on it, but it should really be used wisely. And why I say that is because I mainly work in banking, insurance, and defense in public sector. And when we go back to the finance world, it's almost like an instinct that they choose to use the traffic light colors. It's like, that's the color, like we're gonna have that in every dashboard we have. So the danger of using the status color is to use the entire combination. Because when you use the entire combination, it's not good for a certain population who sees blue and green as the same color, which you can see with the one below, right? And also, if we were to use alerting colors too much, for some people, it may trigger unnecessary or irrelevant emotion to the specific color that you have. Now, if you're trying to look for inspiration for color palettes, this resource from Canva, I find it really, really helpful because when you just upload an image or a nice image you like, Canva is going to output the color palette for you with the codes that you need. So you can just copy and paste to your preference file. But I think what's even better is, hey guys, I forgot to mention this. All the slides will be available. But I love the photo taking. This is not my face. Okay, just kidding. Anyway, so what's even better is Neal created this Tableau public dashboard that he has like all the selection of different color palette that you can just select, click on it, hover on it, and you can copy and paste the entire section. It's exactly what you need to put in the preference file. So I thought that is really, really smart. Well, you can also ignore the whole, having to choose what color to use to get your dashboard sticky by using transparent background. If you use transparent background, all you need to do is to find a really good image as the background of your dashboard and just put it there, and people remember like the oil and gold dashboard that there was, that this is about Melbourne housing market, right? But what we really want to also remember is this. And so after my session yesterday, I'm not sure he bought the shirt before or after, but he went to data night out with the unicorn puke that will like turn on the light and like it will like do the puking. So I thought that was really cool, and then like he like tweeted about it. I was like, whoa, okay, that's a really cool T-shirt. But the point is, we want to avoid having to go to the state of our life. I mean, of course, it will never be that bad, but I mean, how many of you have been there, like get super excited about, the wonderful, beautiful color palette you just discovered? And I have been there, like I wanted to put every single color that's like in my dashboard, like one dashboard. And I think there were like 10 different colors. And then my senior, that was my first year in Tableau. Out of my 5 years, my senior was like kind of chill out a bit. So this concept by Ryan, when I saw it, it just like instantly just changed my life, right? And I realized how important it is to focus on the message of your dashboard, the message that your data is trying to say, instead of trying to make things fancy, right? Just like the concept that we had earlier about appropriate chart types. And very similar to one of the best advice I've ever received is this example done by Andy again, fade to gray. So if you look at this starting dashboard, you have a lot of color to process, right? So you need to figure out what each color represents, what does green represents, at the end, what those different color represents. But when he changed it to grayscale, you can instantly see there is certain key messages right there in front of you, right? So before, after. And then from there on, you start to add colors, right? So maybe you choose a single color to emphasize that particular point. And it could be, a color that is based on the common perception of a certain color in your own organization. So in summary, we want to use color wisely. We don't want it to just, throw everything out there like the unicorn puke. I personally have been doing fade to gray ever since I got that advice, and it works all the time. So let's go back to wealth management dashboard. We're going to use the data ink ratio. We're going to apply that concept and remove all the inks that's not relevant. So here I'm trying to remove the background color, but it doesn't do it in format, so I'm going to workbook style. So as soon as I change it to default, you see that thing disappear. And now I'm trying to change the font of every sheet's title, and the best place to do that is format workbook, right? So you can just go to format workbook, choose your font type, and it will apply across your entire workbook or dashboard. And of course, the color of it as well. So if I were to fade those headers to gray or to a darker or not colorful scale, you will really lead your attention to the data relevant marks. The next thing was removing all the X's on the chart, because for me, I thought if I were to just hover on the points, I can see the values, so I don't really need the X's, right? So one more thing in terms of removing adjusting data ink ratio is to remove all the lines at the background. So if you go to format and lines, which is the last icon, for every single sheet, you can remove that. And now I'm just changing the green to gray. Right, so now going to the bands, because each band has its own color, so we need to change that in each of the bands sheet. Right, so now we're done. So we've covered a lot of grounds, and when it comes to sticking to principle of your design approach, these different topics can help you guide your design process. So let's go back. Do you still remember how the wealth management dashboard originally looked like? Before, it's like this, and when we amp it up, it looks like this. Yeah, this thing happened yesterday as well. I'll go back. Yeah. Okay, ready? Thank you.